Chapter 1. The assumption you never questioned. What if the most important assumption you have ever made about yourself is wrong? The assumption that your consciousness is created inside your brain. Here is the promise I want to make you at the very beginning of this journey. If you stay with me until the end of this video, you will not receive a belief. You'll receive a lens. A way of looking at your own mind that can permanently change how you relate to anxiety, identity, fear, and meaning in your everyday life. But to get there, we must first ask a question that sounds uncomfortable. What if the brain does not create consciousness? What if it receives it? What if it filters it? This idea challenges one of the deepest intuitions of modern culture. We are taught that the brain produces the mind in the same way the liver produces bile, or the heart pumps blood, and at first glance this seems obvious. Change the brain, and experience changes. Damage the brain, and personality changes. Shut the brain down, and consciousness disappears. But does correlation equal creation? Or are we confusing the interface with the source? This question exists because consciousness remains the greatest unresolved problem in science. Chapter 2. The hard problem of consciousness. We can describe neural activity in exquisite detail. We can trace electrical signals. We can map networks. We can predict behavior. But none of this explains why there is an inner life at all. Why there is something it feels like to be you. David Chalmers, a contemporary philosopher who studies the nature of the mind, famously described this as the hard problem of consciousness. Not how the brain processes information, but why information processing is accompanied by experience. Why a brain is not simply dark inside. This matters because everything you care about happens as experience. Love, fear, hope, regret, meaning. These are not data points. They are lived realities. And here is where the standard model begins to feel incomplete. If consciousness were merely a byproduct of neural complexity, then at some level of description, experience should simply appear, but it never does. We get mechanisms without meaning, processes without presence. This gap has led some thinkers to ask a forbidden question. What if the brain is not a generator of consciousness, but a limiter of it? To understand this idea, we need to revisit thinkers who were asking these questions long before modern neuroscience existed. Chapter 3. William James and the Transmission Theory. William James, one of the founders of psychology, proposed what he called a transmission theory of consciousness. In his 1898 lecture, Human Immortality, James suggested that the brain might act like a receiver or a filter, not producing consciousness, but allowing a much larger consciousness to pass through in a reduced personal form. James was careful. He did not claim proof. He claimed plausibility, and his motivation was simple. The production theory could not explain subjective experience, so other models deserved serious consideration. Chapter 4. Henri Bergson and the Function of Limitation. Henri Bergson, a French philosopher who studied time, memory, and consciousness, expanded this idea even further. In Matter and Memory, Bergson argued that the brain's primary function is not to store experience, but to select from a vast field of perception what is useful for action. The brain, in this view, is an organ of choice and exclusion. Think about this carefully. If your brain allowed you to perceive everything at once, every sensation, every memory, every possibility, you would be paralyzed. You would not survive. Limitation is functional. This leads to a radical inversion. Consciousness may not be small because it is weak. It may be small because being narrow keeps you alive. Chapter 5. The Reducing Valve of the Mind. Aldous Huxley, a 20th century writer who explored the nature of perception and consciousness, later popularized this idea using a powerful metaphor. He described the brain as a reducing valve. A valve that narrows an overwhelming reality into a manageable stream. Not because reality is small, but because you are. Now pause and apply this to your own life. Every morning, your mind compresses reality. It selects familiar meanings. It reinforces identity. It labels experiences as good or bad, threatening or safe. You rarely notice this because it feels like reality itself. But what you experience is already filtered. Chapter 6. Why reality changes with your mind. Have you ever noticed how your world changes when your mood changes? The same street feels hostile when you are anxious and beautiful when you are calm. The same silence feels peaceful one day and unbearable the next. If the world were purely objective, this would not happen. But if experience is filtered through consciousness, it makes perfect sense. Here is the first deep reflection. If your suffering changes with your state of mind, then maybe suffering is not caused only by events. Maybe it is caused by how narrowly your awareness is tuned. This does not mean pain is imaginary. It means interpretation shapes experience. Chapter 7: Brain Damage and the Strongest Objection. Now, a serious objection must be addressed. If consciousness is not produced by the brain, why does brain damage alter consciousness? Why does anesthesia shut it down? Why do strokes change personality? This is the strongest argument for the production model, and it cannot be ignored. But notice something subtle. When a radio is damaged, the music distorts. When the antenna is severed, the signal cannot be expressed. No one concludes that the broadcast was created by the radio. The receiver model does not deny correlation. It questions what is actually causing what. Damage the interface, and expression changes. Alter the filter, and experience changes. This does not prove the receiver model, but it shows that the evidence does not uniquely support the production model either. This is where science is forced to be humble. Chapter 8: Walter Penfield and the Limits of the Brain. Walter Penfield, one of the most influential neurosurgeons in history, spent decades stimulating the brains of awake patients. He could evoke memories, movements, sensations, but he noticed something strange. Patients often described these experiences as happening to them, not as choices they made. Penfield became increasingly skeptical that the conscious self could be fully localized to cortical tissue. After decades of directly stimulating the brain during surgery, he began to question whether consciousness could ever be explained as nothing more than neural machinery. Again, not proof, but a serious doubt raised by someone who touched the brain directly. Chapter 9: Interaction, Fields, and the Holographic Brain. Philosopher Karl Popper and neuroscientist John Eccles took this doubt further. In their book, The Self and Its Brain, they argued that the mind and the brain are not the same thing but interact with each other. They believed that reducing consciousness to brain activity alone leaves something essential unexplained, and the idea that mind and brain interact but are not identical. Their position was not mystical, it was methodological. They believed that materialism prematurely closed the question of consciousness. Now let us bring this into the present. Karl Popper, a neuroscientist known for his work on how the brain processes information, proposed a holographic or holonomic model of brain function. The details are complex, but the core insight is intuitive. Information in the brain may be distributed in wave-like patterns, not stored in fixed locations. This suggests the brain that reconstructs experience from patterns, much like a hologram reconstructs an image from interference. If consciousness were field-like, a frequency-based interface would make sense. Notice the pattern emerging. Across psychology, philosophy, neuroscience, and even physics-inspired metaphors, we repeatedly encounter the same intuition. The brain may not be a factory. It may be a tuner. Chapter 10: Attention, Modern Life, and Filter Hijacking. Now, let us return to your life. When anxiety overwhelms you, it feels total. It feels like reality itself has collapsed into threat. But anxiety is a state of narrowed attention, filter locked onto danger. If your mind is a receiver, then anxiety is not the whole signal. It is a tuning problem. This is where spirituality enters, not as belief, but as practice. Many contemplative traditions teach that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. This insight is not mystical poetry. It is a direct observation. If you sit quietly and watch your thoughts, you will notice that they appear and disappear. Something is aware of them. Something is stable, even as thoughts change. The receiver model offers a conceptual bridge to this experience. If awareness is larger than thought, then the brain is shaping awareness, not creating it. Now, consider modern life. Your attention is constantly hijacked. Notifications, headlines, outrage, novelty, each one forces your filter to retune. This is not accidental. Attention is valuable, and whoever controls attention influences experience. This is why people feel mentally exhausted without doing anything physical. their awareness is being fragmented. Here's another reflection. If your consciousness is filtered, then protecting your attention is not self-care. It is existential hygiene. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is when the filter relaxes. Most people avoid silence because the self-model panics, fears losing control. But what emerges in silence is often clarity. Chapter 11. Near-death experiences and the open frontier. Now let us address one of the most controversial topics. Some people point to near-death experiences as evidence that consciousness can persist when brain activity is reduced. Others argue these experiences can be explained by residual brain processes. The science is ongoing. The debate is unresolved. A MaEthereal universe does not sell conclusions where none exist. What matters is this: the frontier is open. Honest researchers disagree, and the mystery remains. So where does this leave us? Here's the synthesis. Science shows correlation between brain and experience. Philosophy shows that experience cannot be reduced to mechanism. Spirituality shows that awareness can be directly recognized beyond identity. The receiver model does not replace science. It complements its unanswered questions. Chapter 12. The practical test you can do today. And now I deliver the promise I made at the beginning. A practical experiment you can do in your own life. The next time a strong emotion arises, anxiety, anger, shame, just take a minute and pause. Do not analyze it. Do not suppress it. Ask a simple question. What is my mind tuned to right now? Then ask another. What is aware of this experience? For 10 seconds, rest is the awareness itself. You will notice something subtle but profound. Awareness is larger than the emotion. The emotion exists within you, but it is not all of you. That gap is freedom. Even if the receiver theory were false as metaphysics, it is powerful as psychology, because your mind does behave like a tuner. And here is the final question. The question is no longer whether consciousness is inside the brain. The question is whether the brain is inside consciousness. If that question unsettles you, stay with it. In the next video, we go even deeper. Chapter 13, closing. If the mind is a receiver, then who is the receiver? Who is watching your thoughts? Because the most radical possibility is not that consciousness exists beyond the brain. It is that you are not a person having consciousness. You are consciousness having a person. Welcome to my ethereal universe. Thanks for watching, and see you on our next video.